accepted, challenge accepted. The attitude is always challenge accepted. Challenge accepted, challenge accepted. The attitude is always challenge accepted.
But I'll try to do it quick. Wait. So silence here. Silent. Yeah. Yeah. Good comeback. Nice one. Okay, thank you for being here and overbearing with the setup for a bit. Thank you. So, hi everyone, and this talk will be about open source, and open source is open choice, right? So I'm going to talk about both the DevOps perspective towards open source, because usually it is something that is more dealt from the developers side of things. I will also share key practical things of how to choose the right open source project for you, because a lot of the times we have a use case, we Google it, and then we find 3, 4 projects that all serve the same use case. And then how do we choose the right one? So I'm going to share key practical metrics of how to choose the right open source for you. And also, we'll look about some scenarios of when to adopt open source, downsides, upsides, stuff like that. So briefly, first about myself. Hi, my name is Hila Fish. I'm a senior DevOps engineer, and I work for Wix. I have 15 years of experience in the tech industry. As kindly introduced, I am a firm believer of communities, and this is why I'm part of the AWS Community Builders program, and I'm also a HashiCorp ambassador, because I talk about Terraform quite a lot. I also organize a big conference in Israel where I live, DevOps Days Tel Aviv. I'm a mentor in courses and communities, and this is one picture from one of my gigs as a lead solo artist. It's very fun. Follow your dreams. Okay, so just to have a short baseline, open source, publicly available, can be modified at will, and a lot of tools that we use in our day-to-day are open source. So Firefox, Java, React, Linux, right? A lot of the tools that we already use in our day-to-day is open source, which is great. So in the late 90s, so I need to do something. Okay. In the late 90s, proprietary software was considered to be the standard, and the notion of making source code public was considered to be a bad strategy for companies. And coming forward from 2020 until now, the concept of open source became mainstream. More companies outsource their code, contribute to open source, adopted open source, and stuff like that. So let's first understand what is so good about open source. So it is a rich developer community that is based on knowledge, but it really relies on communication and collaboration to succeed. Without it, you can't really do and be able to firm a very well mature project without this collaboration. Manish Sharma, who's the general manager of GitHub India, he said that open source is an enabler of innovation, and that businesses that turn to open source, it helps them speed up their business transformation. So if a company has open sourced its cloud or cloud-native projects, then it gains visibility into what the future of cloud and cloud-native will be, and it ensures that it has some sort of effect on the evolving tech landscape. Open source also boosts code quality and security, because Linus Torvald, who's the creator of Linux and Git, said that given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Meaning that if people go over the source code, detect issues, and not only detect them, but also fix them, then the code will be much more secured, in high quality, and stuff like that. And you can also see on the right, there is an open source contribution index, a very recent one, that shows that a lot of companies, big ones, understand the importance of open source and contribute to it. So I have a screen here. Google, Microsoft, Red Hat, Intel. So a lot of big companies understand that it is worthwhile for them to engage in the open source community, to outsource their code and be part of it. Open source also boosts adaptivity. So what is adaptivity? Once you have more users, then you have more use cases, and then the code becomes much more robust. And also, it allows surfacing bugs and edge cases much more rapidly than traditional QA processes, because there's no one-size-fits-all. Everyone uses it on their own time, open issues, and then the project can evolve and become much more mature and much more proof to bugs. I love this sign. I had to use it at some point. So another thing, agility. So modern open source projects usually follow modern software development processes, which leads to rapid development cycles, which leads to more frequent releases without sacrificing quality. And also, you have less bureaucracy, right? Opening issues in GitHub for any projects versus opening a support ticket in a proprietary software, it is different. So once we have less bureaucracy and we don't have this very strict release schedule, we can just release the projects whenever we want. Everyone can use it whenever they want, and it gives us much more flexibility and agility. OK, so now let's talk about the DevOps perspective towards open source, because, again, it's something that is most dealt with from the eyes of developers. So in order to understand the DevOps perspective, let's understand the developer's perspective. So developers care about functionality, meaning they find some open source library, and then they think, will it get integrated in my code properly, and what efforts are needed to do so? As opposed to that, DevOps, we care about the environment, meaning how well it gets integrated in the environment as a whole. And also, we care about other things like security and maintenance and stuff like that. So anything that is more peripheral, we need to care about it as engineers that care about the environment, because we are production gatekeepers that need to make sure that the environment is stable. And also, when it comes to challenges, collaboration leads to better conclusions and solutions, because what is the common ground between open source and DevOps? Collaboration. So once we have this common ground, we are more lenient to do things together. I'm more lenient to open issues, because I know people will see it. They will read that it's very important to me, and I will give also an example for it later on. We all care about the same thing. We want to make the project successful, so we have this thing in common. And also, since we are DevOps engineers are production gatekeepers, we want to have the best solutions possible for our environment. Meaning that if a lot of people come together and different minds can think about different solutions and eventually think about the best solution for a certain use case or a pain point. So we all want to have the best solution possible, because we want to make sure that we have the best implementation and we guard our environment as best as possible. Also, we treat open source as tools, and we ask ourselves, what do we want to introduce to the environment? We want to some help with delivering code. We want to automate this. We want to introduce a certain capability. So since we treat open source as tools, we think about the fact that, OK, I can just integrate it, because a lot of DevOps engineers came from the background of system and not development. So we are integration engineers by heart. We want to integrate stuff. It's not something that is a strange concept for us. So if we see another tool, we just integrate it to our DevOps tool chain, and then just introduce it to the environment. And of course, not everything is good and bright and easy in this realm. We need to think about all sorts of things. So upgrades. Tell me, who here uses Jenkins? OK, lucky ones. So once you upgrade Jenkins, I assume you have any sorts of fear of the plugins getting break, right? And you're like, is it worthwhile to deal with it right now or not? These are the sort of questions that we need to ask ourselves whenever we deal with open source. Maybe there are complexity involved, like Jenkins and plugins, Kubernetes, and other moving parts when you deal with the open source tool. So upgrades, complexity, all of these things, you need to think about whether it is worthwhile to rock the boat and the features and the bug fixes worth it, or you should keep the environment stable. This is something that we care about and we think about whenever we look on open source. Another thing is that there's a lot of projects out there, and we need to select the right one for us, for the environment, and that's why I have this section later on about how to choose an open source project. And since the focus that we have is the environment stability, we always need to make sure that we do what's right for the environment. So that's why in the middle of everything is research. So once I find an open source tool, I'm gonna read about it, do some comparisons, make sure that it really is fit my use case and mature enough to be used and not gonna cause me any issues in production. And also another thing, this is true for being like an engineer in general, but also for open source. So you need to keep tabs and be informed of what's going on. And I'll give an example. So let's take, for example, CentOS. The operating system and CentOS reached end of life at the end of 2021. If I didn't know about it, if I didn't check and keep tabs of what's going on, then I'm putting my systems at risk, because for those of you who don't know, end of life means no more security patches getting released to that operating system. And then if I have servers still installed with CentOS, it's not good, hackers can exploit it, security breaches, the whole works. So that's why I need to be informed of what's going on, know that CentOS reached end of life, and then do whatever I need at work to replace the servers with another operating system. Another example is that, let's say I found an open source tool, project 1.0 is not really what I need, like use case wise. Maybe the features is not exactly what I need. Maybe there's a very big bug that I can't really allow myself to introduce to the environment yet. So if I keep tabs to what's going on, maybe version 2.0 will be exactly what I need. Maybe then the bug will get fixed, the features will be right up my alley and fit my use case, etc. And I really like this picture, because if you can see in the picture, it says, keep moving people, even though no one is there. That's exactly it. You need to keep tabs and be proactive about it without having your team leader breathe down your neck and say, hey, check this, check that. You need to do it yourself, and I believe it will make you even a better engineer in general. Okay, so when should we consider adopting open source? Because there are some scenarios where it's more fit, less fit, so let's see when should you consider adopting open source. First of all, when you have an uncommon use case, and I'll share an example. So in my previous company, we had this application that had to run not 24/7, only like in certain occasions, and other times it could be down and it's okay. And we used back then Google Kubernetes engine, GKE, and GKE didn't allow us to decrease pods in the Kubernetes cluster to 0, only to 1. And we wanted to decrease to 0 because we want to kill the app whenever it's not needed. So we searched online for any use case any open source tool that will help our use case, and we found Keda. Keda is a very good, really awesome production-ready tool that allows us to decrease and downscale pods to 0 based on certain scenarios. When the message queuing has no messages or has less than 50 messages and other conditions that you can set. Once we have it, awesome, then we can just set the integrate Keda in the environment. The application can downscale. Awesome, that's exactly what we needed. Uncommon use cases, we found a solution for it in open source. Solve your developer needs. Sorry for the cut of the solve. Another example, so we had this occurrence where there was non-techie people in the company that needed to run some flows in production. And we didn't want to let them go into the servers because maybe they can do some stuff unintentionally and destroy some stuff. So we found how can we make the flow accessible for them. And so we checked online and we found a script server. Script server, again, awesome open source tool that allows you to make Ansible playbooks, any scripts, Python, whatever, Terraform code accessible via UI, including permissions. So then we allow them to run the flow with permissions, with guardrails, like you can run this flag, but not along with this flag and stuff like that. So it was exactly what we needed. We solved our developers and other people in the company solved their needs. Limited budget, so of course, if you have limited budget, you can go to open source, but also make sure you check the fine print of the licenses carefully, because not always it's exactly free stuff. So just make sure that if this is the reason that you're going to open source, make sure it is really free. Insufficient in-house resources, ability-wise or capacity-wise, like this family guy right here. So there's a saying, why reinvent the wheel, right? If there is an open source tool that already solves your needs, don't reinvent the wheel, don't make your developers work on it, especially if you don't have much developers or much priorities to work on something, and just and choose an open source tool that solves your needs. And of course, we can't discuss open source, like talk only about the good, we need to discuss some bad. So security by obscurity, this notion doesn't apply on open source, because companies can say, proprietary software can say, hey, our source code is closed, you can check the code, and then it's much more secure. Is it good? Is it not? Is it exactly it? You'll be the judge of that, but is a notion to consider. It is also prone to abuse. It doesn't happen quite a lot, but I can give you two somewhat recent use cases where NPM colors package, one of the maintainers added a loop in the code and created a lot of issues for a lot of companies, and also Faker.js, where the maintainer had a bankruptcy and then he deleted the project altogether. So you can say, hey, if I put like in the requirements txt or in the relevant file, I put a version lockdown, I wouldn't face those issues. But if I'm from Israel and I heard about the colors NPM package issue, probably it's because a lot of companies didn't put the version, they just put latest. So it happens, it is prone to abuse. We need to just be aware of that and just know that it exists. Compliance. So in its raw form, open source usually gives no warranty or official guarantee, and making it difficult to use in a business environment where compliance is actually a must to use. Not always entirely free, as I mentioned. Check the fine print, especially, let's take, for example, Terraform that changed the license from MPL to BSL. It doesn't affect everyone. If you're a regular user, you can just use it and that's it. But for companies that based their main product on Terraform, it creates some issues for that. So just make sure you do the right choice, especially if you care about the price of the tool. Discontinued projects. So some projects are backed up by companies, and some are backed up by people like me and you. So for the individual contributors, they can just say, hey, I don't have time to work on the project anymore, and I just stop working on it. And then if you adopted this kind of project, it means that A, you need to either support it yourself or migrate to something else. I don't know if it happens a lot, but it is something that could happen, so you need to take that into consideration as well. Support is not guaranteed. So for companies, proprietary software, they say, hey, we have this we have like support because we are a well-established company. But the thing is about open source, again, collaboration it's what it's all about. With KEDA, I had some issues. I opened an issue. I said, hey, please help me. It's about to be production in really tomorrow. Please help me. And they just went with it and really helped and released a new version out of working hours. So support is not guaranteed. You should assume good faith. But just a note for proprietary software, support is guaranteed for proprietary software, but it's not guaranteed to be good. So this is something to think about. And last but not least, SaaS alternatives. For companies that will go and shift more resources to the cloud, maybe they will prefer cloud lock scenarios as opposed to things that will bound them to rely on DevOps engineers to support open source tools. So we might see an increase of going out of open source once SaaS is getting bigger and bigger, but we need to see. So to sum things up in regards to adopting open source, there's really no right or wrong when it comes to that. It's a matter of perspective, and there are multiple factors to consider, and you should choose what's best for your needs. And speaking of your needs, how do we choose an open source project? We found a use case. We saw that, OK, found 3, 4 ones. How do I choose the right one for us? So these are the key metrics that I can show you here, practical ones, and we will go over very quickly because I don't have much time. So these are the key metrics that you should follow. First of all, popularity. Check the GitHub stars, how many GitHub stars are there. Then you can know if it's popular or not. But put like an asterisk to it, because if this tool has a company-backed up marketing engine behind it, so maybe they will make it more popular because of that. So try to couple it with other factors as well. Check if the project is part of CNCF or incubator, because if so, it means it follows high standards of doing things in a certain way, and it means that the project is mature. Google the project alone to check for online presence, but also Google it versus similar products to check for any reviews. And a lot of the times, only on these comparisons, you'll find the nitpicking that you need. You'll see that, oh, exactly what I need for the use case is not really supported because it's implemented in a way that I can't implement it, or stuff like that. So do those comparisons. You will learn a lot from it. Activity. So check the commits rate. Are they daily, weekly, monthly? How many issues are there? How many releases are there? Is the project maintained by one developer or more? Does the project have sponsors, companies that believe in the future of the project and want to make sure that it will keep on running? So these are questions that you should answer in order for you to understand that if, let's say, you have a heavy use case, you need a lot of features, a lot of bug fixes and stuff like that, how long should you wait for these things to come out? You should wait a couple of days or more, and then you can see if it's something that you can really afford to have or not. Security. So security is something that is less of an issue for DevOps projects because we don't have really supply chain. It's not like a library that we put inside the code. It's a tool that stands on its own. But security is something that you should always take into consideration. So that's why I added it here. Check for any known vulnerabilities or supply chain considerations if you're really dealing with open source libraries, and see if something comes up that really blocks and have a reason for you not to implement this tool. Level of readiness. Check if the project is declared as production ready. For example, KEDA that I mentioned is declared as production ready. Users are already using it. So it's good for me to know as a production gatekeeper. Check the current features. Are they enough to sustain usage? If not, maybe I need to wait for the version 2.0 to come out. And is my use case covered fully in the current state? And if not, am I OK with it? If I'm OK with it, great. If not, again, let's wait for the next version. Maybe it will make sense more than to integrate it. Documentation. So documentation is like the gatekeeper kind of thing of open source, because if the documentation is rich and allows you to understand what's going on, and if it covers how to integrate, known issues, explanations about features, stuff like that, then then if it really fits your use case or not. Because if not, then you should probably use another tool that will make more sense and will be easier to integrate and deal with it in the day-to-day. Ecosystem, very important metric. I don't have much time. I just say that take into comparison Jenkins as opposed to Rundeck, okay? Each have their own abilities, but Jenkins have much more ecosystem, much more bigger ecosystem. People can help you, can find solutions online for things as opposed to Rundeck, which has less. And I dealt with it in my previous company. I had a lot of hard time incorporating things once I worked with Rundeck as opposed to Jenkins. So ecosystem is a very important key metric that will, you will feel it in your day-to-day, and that's why you should really check and lean towards tools that have a very large ecosystem. And check if they have any community channel dedicated, like workspaces in Slack or Telegram and stuff like that. Check if the project is easy to use. Do a POC, see how well it gets integrated in the environment, and check the issues on GitHub. Are the issues about how do I do X or about the features? If the issues are about how do I do X, probably it's not that easy to use. You need to think about it, especially if you don't have the manpower or the womanpower to deal and to maintain it in the day-to-day. And roadmap, is the project defined as an open source or the plan to go towards monetization, also something to consider. And features planning, if they have a roadmap, you can see what is planned next, and then you can decide whether to implement this tool now or wait for the features to come out. So to sum things up for this section, that I know I did it very quickly because I'm out of time, but how to choose an open source project. Ask the general questions to cover the basics and to check if the project is in a ready enough state. And ask the tailored specific questions to cover your use case and pain points. So if you have a heavy use case, rely on and put more focus on the documentation and ecosystem metrics. But if you have no capacity for maintenance, then you should focus on readiness and ease of use metrics. Do a POC and also rely on your research, ecosystem to the rescue. Engage in GitHub, raise issues, contribute for the project success and your success. And briefly, I will just do like this, because I really have no time, how to contribute to open source without writing a single line of code, because we don't have the time to do it, or we don't know how to write code. Open issues, share the knowledge, modify documentation. As you saw, it's a key metric in how to choose an open source project. So if you have time to work on documentation, it will help a lot of people in this decision of even adopting this tool or not. A sponsorship, if you can convince your company to sponsor tools that you're using at work, it will really help them. And last but not least, hold an open source mindset. That means that if you have a use case, go to open source and not immediately go to a proprietary software to adopt. So yeah, that's it. I know that I did it very quickly. I'm sorry about that. But if you have any questions, I'll be just outside, and we can cover anything that you'd like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. So, you know, you can ask Hila and Kirill any further questions in the speaker's corner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're dressed very nice. I gotta say.
You were great.
Thank you.
You just missed I love boss. I saw it's written I love boss, but without B. I love boss.
Nice, okay. Nice. I love open source, but okay.
Okay.
I like that.
So big applause for Hila Fish!